so much. Well, hi everyone. Yeah, so as has already been said, I'm Andy, and I'm a Baptist minister, as well as being sort of leader of the Fuelcast. So I'm just trying to figure out how on earth do I share this screen at this moment in time. So can you currently see a screen that says filming on it? Are you there?
Yeah, that's exactly what we can see.
We can see it. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, thanks so much for giving us some of your precious, valuable time and spending even more time on Zoom. It's so great to be able to share with you. I mean, I think it's been said many times that we're experiencing a historic shift in the way that we, church, are being called to communicate this priceless grace of our divine maker. So it's a new era of ministry, and so it's good to be together, I think, and learn from each other. So thank you for joining the conversation. It's a really important one, I think. I thought we'd give the first word to Alfred Hitchcock. Is that all right? He says, to make a great film, you need three things: the script, and the script. You might have heard that. And I think it's just worth saying that. I mean, Haley did such a good job of helping us think about preparation, but there's so much more. I think before we even pick up a camera, before we even get to that stage, really, the hope and the plan should always be that we've got a creative, divine, divine spirit-inspired outline of what we want to make, what we want to see in our film. And so I think what Alfred Hitchcock's sort of saying is that, out of the three stages of the filmmaking process, which is pre-production, ultimately everything involved before we pick up a camera, production, which is the filming, and then post-production, which is editing and later distribution. The most important stage, he would say, is pre-production. So I know we're all busy. I know we're all, so much to do. But before we even get to pick up a camera or think about anything else, it's, do we, have we thought carefully about what we're going to say and how we're going to say it? I think it's worth sort of saying that for many of us who perhaps have been preparing for talks, there's a learning curve in thinking differently about the writing process. So when we write for a sermon, I think our brains think differently than when we need to write for screen. I think the best way I always recommend is just the simple approach to when you're preparing 2 columns. And on the left-hand column, think about perhaps what's going to be said, what are the words, and of course on screen you've got to think really carefully about, does this need to be, say, cutting the waffle. On the left-hand column, audio, but on the right-hand column, think about your visuals. And it's learning to think in visuals can take a bit of doing. But the good news is we have all these amazing ingredients that we get to use. So, when we're preparing, we're not just thinking of words, we're thinking of powerful photos that pause time and evoke deep feeling. We're thinking about news footage that might bring people into the real world, and we might be thinking about music, the language of the soul, more about that later, or Foley, the sound of rain on leaves and birds' song, or title cards. Actually, sometimes text on the screen can be powerful. Voiceover, as well as of course, piece to camera, where we're actually just talking to the camera. The blank screen and pauses and silence can be really powerful. So I think at this beginning stage, before we even pick up a camera, I want to encourage you to think as widely as you can about what ingredients might help make this video the best that it can be, because as Einstein said, logic will get you from A to B, but imagination will take you everywhere. And I think that we are called, as people that are making kingdom quality sort of content, I think we've got to first start from a place of prayer and imagination, where we're thinking about all these various ingredients before we even pick up a camera, before we even, you know, think about pressing play. So I just want to encourage you to dream, to get creative. And the thing I'm going to be saying again and again is it's not about the gear. It's not about the gear. Gear can be important, and we'll talk about that. But actually, the thing that will limit your filming ability really is not gear. It'll be what you can imagine, what you can perceive, what you can think. And I think right now is a time where we need to be, as I say, dreaming and imagining content that uses all of those ingredients to engage people, to speak with power. So I guess that's just something I think is so important, and building, I guess, on some of the things that Haley said. Think about the ingredients and have those two columns, I think, the audio and the, you know, and the visual. So again, part of before we pick up a camera really is this thing called the Mison Scene. And it's really, you know, it's not just the script that does the talking. Everything in the scene, everything that the camera shows is saying something. Everything's communicating something, whether we sort of like it or not, or whether we mean it or not. And I mean, mise en scene is a sort of posh word for setting, I suppose, but it's the look, it's the feel, it's the props, it's the lighting, it's the, you know, if it was drama, it would be the acting, the makeup, the costume, what you're wearing, the composition, the way you arrange the objects and what's prominent and what's not, the use of light. And you might say, well, Andy, come on, I'm filming from home, you know, in lockdown. But even then we have options, we have choices to make, you know, garden, bedroom, dining table, sofa, even in, you know, choosing the right location is really important, I think, and thinking creatively and just walking around using your feet to see what might work and what style are you aiming for? Do you want, and what style is going to appeal to the audience that you're trying to connect with? Are you looking for a homely feel? Are you looking for something minimalist, something traditional? All of these are things that are really good to think about. I think mise en scene, some of the things, you know, it's good to dream and try things out, but ultimately, sometimes it's just about covering the basics, is watching out for distractions. I made a huge mistake the other day. I looked back at the footage, and there was a light switch that was really close to the sort of the back of the head of someone I was filming, and it was distracting me. It was annoying, and so the thing I would say about all this is you've got to take your time, seeing what, you know, filming is about seeing well, and to see well takes time. I guess here's an example, really, you know, of a clean background. On the left, you've got this annoying bar, you know, versus on the right, a clean background there. Or another one here, you might say, well, they're different types of shots, but thinking about taking your time to think about what is in the setting, you know, what is in the background is ultimately a really big part of what you're communicating. Another thing that I think is really important is color. So, I mean, you know, we haven't got, you know, time and budgets to think about color in the way that the film industry does. But of course, we know that different colors can evoke different feelings. They have different meanings. Green tends to be creative and neutral, and yellow, warm and relaxing. Red might be passionate or a warning. but it's most basic when you're setting up for filming. I would say, there are some colors that go well together and there are some colors that don't go well, some sort of clash. Color palettes are the way that Hollywood might think, and we haven't got budget for that, but we can actually think about, well, how does what we wear interact with what's in the background? Are there colors that just don't really work? And so, all this, I guess, before we've even, it's all part of this process of filming great content. I want to talk about light, which is part of the Mison Scene, but Carl, I don't know if you want to jump in, or any of you guys want to jump in terms of your experience. I know we're on budgets. I know we're sort of often in lockdown, but any sort of questions or any comments around that before we go any further?
It's a pretty good start. The screen ratio is kind of a little bit whacked out, Andy. It's gone portrait, not landscape, but let's not bother about that at the moment. I think people can see enough and they'll learn most, I think, by just listening to you. Just in terms of things like color and what have you, obviously you've spoken a little bit about thinking about the kind of the composition, I guess, a little, and the actual setting and matching colors and color palettes and what have you. Some people, this will be like old hat, they've done art in college or what have you, or they're interior designers, color palettes are us, and for others it'll be brand new. Just a quick question that springs from mind for myself. If you are thinking about what colors match with each other, where would you go look? Is there somewhere you can like go and find a color palette to see? Do you know what I mean? That's
yeah. I mean,
it might be the last thought for some rather than the first thought, but it does make quite a big difference, doesn't it?
I think it makes a huge difference. I guess sometimes it's keeping it simple is often a key thing. But yeah, you can Google color palettes and you'll get you'll get them most often used for sort of decorating, I think, and picking colors for your walls. It's all the same kind of color science is all the same thing, really. Just thinking about what colors go together and what don't, and that I think when you're talking about editing, that is a big part of the color science aspect of filming as well. So, but yeah, Google it. Color palettes, you'll get all sorts of ideas about just what can work and what won't. But ultimately, it's part of your voice. It's part of your creative voice, and making these decisions about what you like and what you don't like other people might not like it, but it's you. You make your own choices.
That's an excellent point. And Jonathan's just put in the chat box that obviously there's some editing software that allow you to change color tone. I think color grading is certainly an art form in and of itself. We'll speak a little about that next week. The basic software doesn't allow you to change tone massively, but on the more advanced software, there's a huge amount of range of color tone that you can produce. And it just might be worth saying in reference to what you've just said there, Andy, before you move on to talk about lighting, that in terms of expressing who you are, what I've noticed, I don't know whether you want to reflect quickly on this before you move on, what I've noticed is that particular filmmakers or even particular film series will have a particular color tone that almost that's the prompt. You see that color tone, almost you mentally go to that. So Scandi dramas are the biggies, who tend to desaturate quite a bit in terms of their filming technique, and as a result, every time a Scandi drama comes on, particularly if it's by the same kind of school of filmmakers, you instantly know what it is just because of the actual color tone.
Absolutely. Yeah, and light will come into this as well, but for sure, I mean, different filmmakers, yeah, you'll almost automatically recognise some of the color choices that they make, and of course, whether it's bright or whether it's punchy, whether it's sort of more moody, the color is all part of that. Yeah.
Bro, thanks. I think let's move on.
Yeah, I think there's a guy called George Eastman who says, when he talks about light, he says, guys, whatever happens, just embrace light. admire it, love it, but above all, know it. Know it for all you're worth, because it's the key, many would say, to taking what can look a bit ordinary to making it look beautiful. Light really can. It's the raw materials of photography and filmmaking, really. Light and time are key. And so deciding where you want shadow and where you want light, and creating, there's a big part of, again, your voice and your expression. These are just some really, really quick thoughts about lighting. And you might think, well, I haven't got all this lighting gear, but actually, the first point makes it clear that, look, I think one of my favorite, I don't know if you can see these slides properly or not, but one of my favorite types of light is window lighting, zero gear. Window lighting, if you're able to get it, is the most natural, the most beautiful kind of light. Now, there are problems with window light. As I filmed with Haley, we had massive problems because the light was, the sun was going behind clouds, and so the light would be bright and then dim. So there are problems with window light, and obviously you've got to be close to the window to really get the best effect. But window lighting is beautiful with zero kit, guys. So on the diagram there, you'll see that there's a sort of a reflector just to fill in some of the shadows. But very often I'm out and about filming. If I'm in a hurry, which a lot of us will be, window light is a great place to start. If you've got a window nearby and you can set your setting around that, excellent. Really the best form of lighting, I think, personally. But of course, then the place to start is with one light. If you've got one light, and it doesn't have to be necessarily a professional film light, but here's a sort of a diagram, perhaps, of one of the ways that you might light. Flat lighting is okay, where if you like that, there's times when flat lighting is okay, but if you look at this, if you've got one light, I think very often to set the light off, to the left-hand side of camera or the right, so that you just create you can see some shadow and some light there, I think makes for beautiful lighting. You're going to play around with it. You're going to lift it high or low. But of course, bear in mind, if you light from below, you can create a kind of a ghoulish effect. So just be attentive, I guess, to what's happening. And then if you've got two lights, you might use one to fill in the shadow. So if you'll notice on this next shot, I hope you can see these shots okay, but there's less shadow. So on the first one, because you've just got one light, there's a more dramatic look. There's more shadow on the left side of the face. But if you've got two lights, you might want to just fill in some of that shadow and create some light. If you've got three lights, I think a hair light or a backlight, or what we call a rim light, can be really nice. Can you see the difference there about how on the left-hand image you've got the light coming in on the back of the head? Now, the thing is with the rim light, you do need to be able to sort of try and control the beam of light, so that it's not just sort of a wide source, but you want to be able to control the beams of light. But again, it's not just pro gear. You can often, you'd be surprised at what you can do with old spotlights, and use sheets or to try and soften the light, play around, try different things. But if you've really got time and you've got a bit, I think if you can use, four lights, you might think you might have a key light or not. You might have a fill light and the hair light, but getting some light in your background can really make things much nicer. Fairy lights, I don't know. Again, it's part of your voice, really. but spend time playing with light, looking at light. Try and soften your light if you can. If you're using spotlights, they might be a bit hard or whatever, how lights you've got around the house. So you can buy softening material that's cheap, and beware for fire hazards depending on the heat. But you can throw softening sheets over lights and play around and learn to love light and take your time with it. It would be it can be great fun, again, to sort of create your own voice. So any questions about that? Carl, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you. So Nick's just put a bike light with a piece of paper in front of it is great. That's fine, Nick, as long as it doesn't catch fire. But that's pretty much, I think, exactly what Andy was just suggesting. And there's a question asking, can you explain what is meant by flat lighting? Right,
my apologies. Yeah, so flat lighting. I mean, if you look at the image of the girl, the fairy lights in the background, the one with the longer hair. So the light on her face is actually quite flat. If you can, so that means that there's no real shadow. There's no real shadow. The whole of the face pretty much is the same. The light is spread evenly, as it were, covering the whole of her face. Whereas if you look at the other lady, you can see there's some shadow and some light, which makes it a bit more sort of three-dimensional. So one is flat and one is sort of more dimensional.
That's helpful, thank you. There's people that are talking, baking parchment as something to cover the front of a light presumably won't catch fire. Yeah, so that'd almost certainly do a good job of softening it. And actually, baking parchment's got quite a warm tone to it. So you'll note with some of the lights that you can buy, I'll mention one of these just as we kind of come to a close, as I'm talking about gear in a bit. But you can change the color tone on some of the lights. People are putting various suggestions in the box at the moment, and that's great. That from a whole range of prices, but you don't need to spend 800 quid on 2 pro box lights or what have you that are studio gear. And the only other thing I was going to mention on lighting, maybe before we move on to the next bit, is just to ask your thoughts about filming outside. I'm kind of a big fan of using like the light that God provided for us type of thing, not theologically, but just because he provided it free of charge, and it's generally not so bad, is it? So I'm aware of the fact that when I film, I'm not on location in lots of different places. I'm guessing a lot of people in the Zoom room today will generally be filming from where they are, around the home type of thing, or around the area. So I now know where the sun is in the sky at various different points of the day for various different locations that I like to film in. So you can kind of get the sun at different points in the sky to get a different effect on the lighting that you're filming, depending on what you want. I'm aware of the fact there are maybe other hazards with filming outside, but just any thoughts you've got or comments about technique in filming outside?
I think, the number one thing that obviously has to be said is if you can go for what we call golden hour, then that is often the best. Now, that means often, I mean, ultimately what we're talking about is the time around sunrise, where the sun is low in the sky. And what happens is, as the sun's low in the sky, the angle is sort of longer. So essentially the atmosphere works as a kind of a softbox, nature's softbox, or baking paper, what have you. So when the sun's high in the sky, it tends to be harder. It creates shadow, but there's a golden, beautiful, soft light that is there. At sunrise, around sunrise and sunset. It's a great time if we see the sun. That is. So that's always a good time. Avoid hard lighting if you can when the sun's really high in the sky. But sometimes it's all you've got to do what you got to do. Sometimes when it's a bit cloudy outside and the light's constant, it's that can work well. Sometimes when I'm out and about filming outside, what you sometimes need is what we call a bit of fill, just a bit of fill light, because we want if we're filming a person. We want them to be often just a little bit brighter than their surroundings. So if you can't angle the sun, you know, if you can't angle your subject in a place, in a position where the light sort of catches them, then sometimes if you're able to take a battery light with you, and you can get them as cheap as, you know, pretty cheap battery lights, just to create a bit of what we call fill light on your subject. One light sort of principle can make all the difference. And what is a real pain, as I've said, is if the sun's in and out of the clouds, it can be a nightmare in edit, because you know, 1 minute you can see you know, it's exposed well, other times it's too dark. So I would sometimes, if the sun is in and out of the clouds, then sometimes opt for some shading under some trees with a bit of fill light or something like that. Oh my goodness, we could talk about it for ages, but
that was brilliant. That's brilliant. Thanks. Excellent. Let's move on. We've got about 15-20 minutes left, Andy, so let's move on and we'll keep the questions going as you continue to talk.
Okay. And again, I just want to emphasize, you know, seeing takes time. Seeing well takes time. You can't do this stuff when you're in a rush. I mean, from a framing point of view, and again, this is all still part of the mise en scene, really, the setting and whatnot, but for the framing, I think one of the things that's really important is, you know, you've worked out your setting, maybe you've sort of thought about color, you've got all these things sort of together, but actually, it's only when you look through the lens that you've got, that you really see what is in front of you. So depending on whether you're using an iPhone or you know, or whether you're using a camera with a zoom lens, you may have a range of options, but what is in front of you will look different depending on the frame you've got. So I mean, I guess here's just an example, I think you can see this well, of different lenses and what they will, how much of your mise en scene will be picked up. You might have this lovely setting in mind, but you've only got you know, a 50mm lens with you, or you've only got an 85mm lens, or the camera that you've got won't pick up on it. So there is this sort of relationship really between the lens you're using and the scene that you're trying to set. So yeah, I think we'll talk about film brand perhaps a little bit, but just constantly, as you're looking at arranging your scene and your setting, you need to be constantly looking at, well, what lens have I got, or what zoom capability looks best, and just take your time in selecting the right lens. And of course, you know, sometimes you use your feet. You want to get closer, so you use your feet to get closer, but sometimes you're limited in the room space that you've got. So it's an interplay really between the distance between yourself and the subject, or what lens you've got available. But this is really important. I think also, just thinking about framing techniques, you've probably heard of rule of thirds. Sometimes it's more interesting to, if you think of the rule of thirds, if you split the frame, you know, into a kind of a grid, and think about the relationship between your subject and the grid. I mean, I think that you know, eyes on the upper line are quite important. I think you know, having what we call looking space. Can you see where we've got the long side and the short side? If you're using rule of thirds, it's always important that there's more space in front of our subject's eyes than behind it. Otherwise, I mean, that's as a general rule, that's really important. But you can think of rule of thirds and think of as you think of what's in the frame. Some people prefer central framing, which I think work. But again, you can use the rule of thirds to help you think about that. But I think thinking about a sense of balance and symmetry for me are important anyway. I mean, Stanley Kubrick was well known for a central framing and a sense of balance or symmetry. So if you are using central framing, think about, keeping it simple is often a good idea, but yeah, is there a sense of balance, and does it look a bit sort of uncomfortable? And again, I would just say the key thing is use your feet. Use your feet, use your feet. I mean, my mentor has always been saying, just whenever you're framing, just keep walking around, keep trying different angles. You'd be amazed at what is there just by moving to the right a bit, the left a bit, up a bit, or down a bit. Use your feet and move around. I don't know, you'll want to get into this too much, but I think, you know, of course, in film grammar, we have extreme long shots and very long shots and medium shots and medium close-ups and so on it goes. And actually, if while you're filming your content, if you have time or if you have multiple cameras, which you may or may not, but you know, sometimes framing the very same subject with perhaps a medium long shot as well as a medium close up and a close up, to be able to interchange throughout your film will be really helpful for the viewer. It will really help if you can. Now, sometimes you've got one camera, so you think, I'll do the first bit of the script from this as a long shot, and I'll pause, and I'll do the next part of the script as a mid shot. You know, it depends how much time you've got. And of course, as well as various shot types, we've also got various camera angles. I mean, you know, I'm not gonna, it's low angles and high angles, and each of these will say different things, which I wish I had more time to go into, but time's running slow. And of course, how you choose, where you choose to put your focus is really important. And shallow depth of field is something. I'm conscious of time. Carl, do you want to jump in now?
Yeah, no, that's great. And obviously in the room today, we've got a number of people that are at various different kind of levels when it comes down to this whole kind of filmmaking and photography thing. So there are some people talking length of field and talking about, I don't know if we said bokeh, but that's what they're meaning. So that kind of beautiful effect, the blurry effect in backgrounds and what have you, that you can get if you muck with focal lengths in various different ways if you're filming manual. On the other end of the scale, there are people that are thinking, how can I get the best out of my smartphone? Yeah. And particularly if you're filming on your own. So obviously that is an added complication if you're filming on your own rather than somebody who is filming you, in terms of how you set it up and all the rest of it. It is possible, and I'm going to drop into the chat in just a little bit an example of something that I filmed on my own entirely, using 2 different cameras and a number of different shots. It took me 2 hours to film and 2 hours to edit. So just to kind of give you an idea of kind of what it is. But I did use two cameras. Both of them were fairly basic, but one of them was an iPhone. So filming with an iPhone and filming an iPhone on its own, you can still get some decent effects, Andy. You can still get some.
My goodness, let me tell you, honestly, what you can film. I've seen people film incredible documentaries to prove the point that and they filmed with nothing more than a phone. The cameras on these things are excellent. I say it again and again and again. Whilst I would say, if you want to really, if you feel a sense of pull to give time to filmmaking, I would recommend that you do learn the basics of manual camera usage, which is much more simple than you think. If you could, but I just would emphasize again and again, an iPhone, good light, good composition, time, creativity, you will be amazed what you can do. But it just takes time to learn.
Brilliant. There's various kind of comments coming in about apps that can be used on smartphones, some of which can be used, I think, on Android as well as iPhone. Just to make a note of that for those that are commenting. I guess quite a few have got iPhones, but a lot haven't. But yeah, I think I would want to say that there's a big difference between literally holding an iPhone in front of your face and filming yourself, and actually getting into a routine of almost having a plan of how you're going to film this. So you can produce something that looks quite different with an iPhone just by having the 3 sections of what you're going to say, almost like a 3-point sermon type of thing, filmed at different distances away from your face. Yeah. And then when you edit it together, it keeps the interest, or from a slightly different angle, or whatnot. So there's a whole load that goes with what is basic filming technique that will hold interest for depending on the audience that you're looking at. If it's literally just the good people in your church, normally they're generous enough to watch whatever you do, to be honest, whatever it looks like. The second you put it online, your audience, though, isn't just your church, it's the whole world. So actually it is worth thinking. It's not difficult, because I think once you get into your kind of, well, it's as difficult as you want to make it, but actually you get into a workflow, don't you? And the second you kind of have your style, and you have the, all right, I can do this at a long shot, this at a close shot, this at a side angle, in this location at this time of day, boom, right, there we go. Once you've done it once, you do it that way several times, and you do it. So you've got your presets, your default settings almost for your filming.
I think if you're filming on your own, just whether it's with a phone or whatnot, but if you can get if you can get yourself some sort of cheap tripod or stand that you can use for your phone, and if possible, like some sort of monitor. So I think, you know, when I say monitor, I mean just something that you can see yourself in the scene, or otherwise you've got to sort of you know, do a bit of filming, run around, check it looks the way you want to, run around in front of the camera again. But it takes time, but you'd be amazed what you can do.
Real. Got about 5 minutes, Andy?
Yeah, I think I'll probably just whiz through these, and then we can sort of talk around questions. I can't emphasize enough the importance of sound. I mean, sound is 50% of what we're doing, if not more, actually. And so taking, you know, figuring out within your budget and within your environment, and how you can make sure you get the best possible sound. And I think I'll give this over to Carl to talk about more, but I mean, there are lots of different ways you can record audio and what we call Foley. Foley is just ambient sounds, which can really add to a film. I would say the most important thing, if you're able, is to be able to monitor what the camera's hearing, what is the mic is picking up through a pair of headphones. If you're able to do that, it will really help you. The amount of times I made mistakes on this in the past, where I've filmed great image, but then there was a wind noise or something. I used to think, oh no. Sound is so important. We hear sound in our mother's womb before we see anything, and the sound is so important. I think linked to that is music, and I think, is it Plato said, rhythm and harmony find their way into the inward places of the soul. I think music, the choice of music, you know, in your film is so important. Now, it can get you in a lot of trouble. Warning, if you've got a strong melodic piece, it can distract from your message, or you know, it can get in the way. If it's overused, it can be annoying. So you have got to take your time, and I mean, finding the right music and the right mood that brings up that sense of emotion or excitement or whatever it is that you're trying to create. It takes time to find the right sort of stuff. I think Carl's going to talk about royalty-free music and where you can get it, but please take time. Sometimes you don't want to see anything on screen, but just listen. The use of silence can be so powerful with just an on-screen text. I mean, pay attention to what we're hearing is really really key. I mean, we're out of time. I wanted to talk about the importance of building up a library of images, you know, so that you've got ingredients that you can pull upon. I wanted to talk about, guys, please, if you take up art, you don't painting, you don't expect to be brilliant on day one. The thing is, just take your time, practice, experiment, and enjoy it. You know, it's a joyful, creative experience when we allow the Spirit of God to kind of bring creativity into filmmaking. It's a joy. It's a joy, and just if we're willing to become learners and take these, mix these ingredients together, whatever level we're at, whatever gear we're at, you know, we've got whatever budgets, you'll be amazed at what you can do. I'm hoping that there are a number of you. Some of you will be doing it because you feel you've got no choice. But I'm hoping and praying that some of you will be hearing the Spirit saying, I really see this as an important call. I really feel that, you know, there's a need, there's an opportunity, and the Spirit will be stirring you to say, to pour your heart and your soul into learning the art, learning this powerful means of communicating this beautiful gospel, and you know, with the world. So I apologize for, there's so much, it's like, you know, there's so much we could say, but Carl, do you want to?
Yeah, Andy, thank you so much. Do you want to take us off screen share so that we can all see us all? That what people are saying is what I think is my feeling. We could do with like several more hours of this. Andy, it'd just be incredible if there was the opportunity, I guess, to do something more. I, to be perfectly honest, would love to learn more from you. And so if there's the possibility almost of future courses that you wanted to run, even if it was in virtual, then I would very much be in favour of that and wanting that to be the case. So yeah, I just would like folks to email Andy, and at the end, Andy, can you drop your email address into the chat box if you'd be interested in further training and maybe a little bit more advanced techniques and learning a little bit more from the basics and working it up in terms of filmmaking. Then can you drop an email to Andy and let him know if there's enough interest, it's worth you running one. You'd be up for it, would you, Andy?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think we're on a journey together. I'd love to just have a conversation and pass on what I've learned over the years and learn from others. I think there's a conversation to be had that I'd love to be part of. I feel good to move through.
That is brilliant, excellent. What I want to do, just because I'm aware it's 10, we've got 10 minutes left. I'm very quickly going to run through some bits and bobs about gear. Because I know that some people are here to hear about gear. Let me just quickly run through some of the things that Andy might have already mentioned, but just, I'm the guy that does this on his shoestring because I haven't got a lot of money, and who I work for hasn't got a lot of money either. I'm going to drop into the chat box now various different bits of gear and links that I'm showing you on the screen, so you can click the links. Apologies that they are all, or most of them, are Amazon links. It's not because I'm working for Amazon or Approve, it's just because it was the easiest place to find the gear to pass on to you where I'm getting it from. These are not recommendations, hear me clearly. This is the gear that I use. Go and do a bit of research, but this is what's worked for me. And the example that I'll give you of a video that I'll drop into the chat at the end was filmed using these bits of gear. So cameras first off. First and most important by a long way is this. This is an iPhone. Other smartphones are available. This particular iPhone's got a number of lenses on, which is helpful. It's got a wide lens, a standard lens, and a telephoto lens built into it. But of course, all smartphones have got a zoom function. So, and most of us have probably got the ability, either our own feet or some form of ambulance, to get closer or further away from the subject. So one way or another, this is by far and away the most used bit of kit that I use by a long way. It's kicking out in 4K. If you want to film in a slow motion, it does a fairly mean slow motion. The built-in audio is okay if you are inside, if you are close enough to the camera, but I'm about to talk about audio in a second. So that is the biggest bit of kit. It is also my main work gadget, and you can also do this thing where when you hold it to your ear, you can speak to people that aren't in the same room as you as well. And to be honest, that was a revelation to me. That is the basic bit of kit. The other thing that I have used in the past, I've just got a newer camera, which is a little more expensive, so I'm not going to hold that one to the screen, but is this. It's a basic DSLR. This one's a Nikon or a Nikon, depending on how you want to pronounce it. This is a D5300, 5600 is the one I've put in the chat box, a slightly newer version. It's kind of got a half decent zoom lens on it, which is 18 to 140, which gives a decent range in terms of framing options. That new will cost you 800 quid with that lens. With a basic lens, because 18 to 55 mils, you can get it for 580 quid, and you can get one second hand, I think, for about 400 quid on eBay last night if you got there quick enough. All right, and there's all kinds of second-hand camera shops that you'll be able to get them with a warranty. So in terms of cost, that's the cost. This particular one costs more than twice as much as that, just in terms of kind of where the cost lie. This one does an awful lot more, but that one is there. And memory card, you need a decent memory card that works relatively fast and decent capacity probably, but different cameras use different memory cards. The one I've got at the moment uses an SD. This is a CF card in that one, but they're the two cameras that I use, and that's the expenses of them. I really want to talk about audio, just because the stuff that you guys are kicking out is awesome. What you're saying is amazing. I want the world to hear the stuff that you're saying. My observation is that some of the time the world can't hear a word that you're saying. That's not a slight, it's just the way that it is. And that's because you're using the internal microphones in your smartphones, or worse still, in your camera. Yeah, they are rubbish. I declare them rubbish right here and right now. The only way that they work is if you are really close to the actual gadget, and then even then they're not brilliant, depending on what you're using. Invest in a microphone. Here is the microphone that I have used for years, and this is the one used on the example film that I'll stick in the chat in the end. This cost £18. It's wired. It's got, I think it's a 15-meter wire on it. So you can be 15 meters away from the camera that's filming you, but the audio is here. Okie doke. And that's what will come out on your recording. It gives you so much more creative freedom to be able to use something like this. Yes, you can get wireless ones. Yes, you can get far better makes than the one that I've suggested. This is a BOYA one. It's very basic. You can get Rode microphones that do a good job of stuff on videography stuff. And you can get a wired Rode microphone for about 60 quid, which is a semi-pro kind of standard recording. Not loads and loads and loads of money, but please do think about your microphones. Tripods is the next thing that I was just going to mention to you. Handheld stuff, generally speaking, doesn't work particularly well, even though there is some stabilization in most smartphones. Actually, it's far better if you have a tripod. A basic tripod with a smartphone holder on the top, you can get for less than 20 quid. The one that I've just dropped into chat there, I think is something like 18 or 19 quid. Equally, get various attachments for the top. So it'll hold a standard camera, a smartphone camera, and you can screw things like external lights into it as well. You might find it's even an option to be able to get lighting rig that actually sits on something like this. Yeah, Pete, neither can I. Mine's a smartphone, iPhone 11. But equally, you can get some decent quality on a smartphone that costs you 200 quid. Genuinely, you can. Right, the next thing that I just wanted to mention is gimbals. Gimbals is something that have come up in the chat a couple of times. A gimbal, I'll show you in a second, effectively means that you can walk and film yourself or film something else on the hop and it stays still. Let me turn this on for you. So that's the same smartphone that has been put into the gimbal. And this is what happens. So as you move around, the camera stays still and reacts to what you're doing. So you can film yourself on the front-facing camera, and as you're walking around and as it's moving around, it's staying in the same place. So it's really still. It's also got a little tripod thing on the bottom, so you can sit it down on something, and the app that's a free app that goes with this gimbal will even follow your face around. So if you move around, then the gimbal will move and follow your face around the room. That gimbal cost £80, 80. So you can pay 400 or 500 quid easily for a gimbal, easily. You can pay thousands if you want a pro one. That one cost 80 quid. The app that goes with it is free, and it makes the world of difference in terms of you being on the hoof. Lighting, just to mention lighting, I know I'm going fairly quick, guys. You can look back at this in the recording, and I'll put the links in the description on our YouTube channel as well. All kinds of lighting, we've discussed this. Doesn't need to be expensive, but that is the light that's in the chat box at the moment, which you can see. You can change the brightness of it, and you can change the tone. So you can see the tone changing. So you can get some slightly different color grades on the tone, and you can change the brightness on it as well. It's battery powered. That will sit on top of your camera, but please, better still, given what you've just heard Andy saying, sit it on a tripod and put it to an angle so that you kind of have got various different angles. This one's also a fairly decent one for a backlight, although all that does is make my ball patch glow. So I'm not going to show you that. But it has a plug-in, so you can plug it into the wall if you want. You don't have to necessarily have it on battery power. You can buy an adapter for it, but that is fine. Next thing I just wanted to mention to you, someone mentioned last week about teleprompters. Here is the teleprompter that I've got. Let me say there are different kinds of teleprompters that fit on different gadgets. So you can get a teleprompter that actually will sit on the front of a DSLR or a kind of a full body camera on the lens, actually hold onto the camera itself. Tiny little thing, which I'll show you the principle, but you sit your smartphone on it, and the smartphone app is what you effectively is reflecting onto the screen. This is the one that I use, which cost 160 quid and fits onto a tripod with the camera behind it. What I'm going to do is just try and show you the effect that it actually has. If I open the app, I don't know whether you can see that or not, but basically what you've got is that bit of kit that sits on a tripod. The camera goes through this bit at the back, and it's a piece of high quality glass with like a tray on the front that I've got my iPad on. You can get the app free, or you can get a pro version of the app if you want to pay for it. That's basically what the app does. So you send your Word document to your iPad, it goes into the app, and then it scrolls through. That's what you're reading. So effectively you're reading the script, and the camera behind can't see any of that. So all it's doing is looking at your face and is focused on your face. And that is how you get your script prepared and read to camera. So you're looking right down the lens, but you're reading from a script. If you don't want a piece of hardware, then you can get that app on your phone. So you can get exactly the same app, and I'll try and put a link for that as well in the chat later on. that you can look through your phone into the camera of your phone, but you can see what is scrolling on the screen of the phone. So effectively, it's a built-in teleprompter in your app. And you can get that free or a pro version of that as well. We're coming into land here. There was one other thing that I was going to mention. Yeah, sometimes I've had a few people ask me, how do you get things, particularly from an iPhone to a Windows laptop or a Windows computer for editing? How do you get the footage across? Loads of different ways of doing it. If you can actually get your iPhone to talk to your Windows, or your Windows smartphone to talk to your Mac, brilliant. But this is what I use, which effectively is a memory stick. One end has got a connector to go into the phone, that saves it. Pop out the other end, and it's got a USB connector that goes into the laptop, and that transfers the file from the phone like that to the laptop like that. And effectively, that's how I've done it in terms of transferring files between an iPhone and a Mac. I said I'd give you an example of something that I've filmed using that basic kit. Total price for all of that kit, if I was buying it now, probably I'd buy some of it secondhand. There would be change out of 700 quid. Quite a bit of change, actually, maybe out of 600 quid. I'm aware of the time, guys. If there are any questions, Hannah and Hayley, if you've spotted any questions that you want to ask, just as people are coming to an end, please do. I don't want to detain people too long, but if people are interested to ask questions, then please do. Is there anything that's come in whilst I've been talking? Not sure there is. There's been lots of things shared, which has been incredibly helpful. Thank you for sharing what you found useful as well.
There was one that was just saying, but it was like, I can't find it now, drones. Thoughts on drones?
Andy, I'm going to hand over to you. Thoughts on drones?
Yeah, I mean, drones are fantastic. I mean, the technology and the way that, the drones have developed over these last few years is incredible. In terms of, I mean, we have a basic, a Mavic Pro, which is about 1,000 quid. So the law, one thing I will say is that the law's changing quite quickly. I don't know if you remember the airport situation we had where there were some drones and disturbed air flight. So now you do, as well as buying the kit, you have to also register and take a test. You can use a drone for your sort of charitable church content without having to take a full license, but if you're using it commercially, you have to take a full license these days. But what you can get is brilliant. You obviously have restrictions on where you can fly and where you can't fly. But guys, I mean, these things are so easy to fly these days. You pick it up in no time. I was really nervous when I first started flying my drone, but they are amazing, and the whole vantage point. Anything that the human eye doesn't ordinarily see is really good. So macro photography, aerial photography, it can be really interesting. So yeah, I mean, but it is quite expensive, and but worth it if you've got a budget and a will to pursue it. I'd be happy to talk with anyone who wants to a bit more info on that.
Brill, that's excellent. There's also some questions here about maybe a whole different seminar on where to try and get royalty-free stuff. You did say I'd mention royalty-free music. There are loads of places. Just bear in mind the principle though, folks. You're not going to find a lot of decent royalty-free music for free, right? And there's a good reason for that. So it might be royalty-free, but that doesn't mean it's cost-free. So you'll find one or two places. I think Hannah's also put in there about YouTube music, which has got some royalty-free music that will sit within YouTube without you getting gripped with copyright filters. That's decent enough. But your best way to get royalty-free music, if you're going to be using films and it's part of your mission and part of your ministry going forwards, then I mean, I personally have done this, but you might want to talk to your churches. Invest in a subscription to somewhere that's going to be able to give you something that you're looking for. You can typically get it for anything between 15 or 25 quid a month for a subscription to a provider, one provider or another. I've suggested Creation Swap, which is a Christian-based one. So that's the link that I've put in, but there are literally hundreds of them out there. Check them out and see what works well for you. And that will give you not just music, it will give you still images for your PowerPoints. It will give you some film images, snippets that will be like B-roll. We've not spoken about that today, but like padding. So rather than just you, it'll be a bit of scenery or something you can use in an introduction or what have you. All of that will be available to you if you subscribe to a particular site, and including the music itself. So that's kind of my feeling when it comes down to royalty-free stuff. I'm going to bring us into a close, but I just wanted to make sure if there are any other questions that are not answered that need to be answered, guys.
No, I think that's great. There's loads of resources, loads of stuff in there, and I think it's really interesting, the range from like filming on kind of with your laptop camera and Zoom to investing out. And I think thank you for giving us that overview of different value equipment, which is always really good. But yeah, I think everything's covered, and of course, as Carl said, all the chat and comments will be and the links will be with the video. So
brilliant, guys, thank you so much for being with us today. There's been a lot today, but our hope is that it begins to help us think about simple things that make the world a difference, like framing and composition and lighting and audio, and all of those things. It's once you get your head into that place, it's not difficult, but it makes the world a difference to what we're kicking out there for the whole world to see. So I hope that's been really, really helpful. I said that this would be recorded, and it has been, and I will make it available on our YouTube channel. I'm putting those details in the box right now. So please do. You'll need to, if you want to come to how to edit, then it would be helpful if you book in separately. It's not the same URL as this one. Some people made that mistake today, so please book in separately. There's a few places left on the booking for that. Father, I thank you so much that we've had the opportunity today to think about how we are producing what we are hoping will share your story with the world around us. Lord, thank you for each of those that's been in the room today and for their desire to serve you and your kingdom. Simply, God, we want to do all that we can, Lord, to do our best. Lord, we recognize that, God, we are far, far short of anything like perfection. Lord, we wish that we could filmmake like Fuelcast, but most of us, God, are getting by on our smartphone, just trying our very best. Please help us, Lord, to figure out how we can be our very best just with our smartphone. May it, God, be a reflection of our worship, a release of our creativity. And Lord, for those in the room today whose Spirit of God you've just given a little nudge to, this is something that I want you to be gifted in and to be skilled in and to use for my kingdom more in the future than in the past. For those that have sensed that over these last weeks and months, maybe just last hour, Lord, I pray that there's that determination to learn more, whether it is ongoing stuff with Andy or with others, to be able to use the creative gift that you've put in us, to release it so that it might be useful to tell your story to this world that so desperately needs it. Your blessing, Heavenly Father, on my brothers and sisters today. May they know all goodness in their lives. Amen.
Amen.